My name is Marcus Jones. I'm working at BigChainDB here. And BigChain is building Ocean Protocol. So who here has heard of Ocean Protocol? A couple people. And I always like to get a bit of a feeling for who's in the crowd. So we have like Data Natives satellite event here. Anybody coming from that direction, let's say? So Data Natives people. Yeah. Cool. Anybody going to the conference, the Data Native conference, or the hackathon this weekend? So there's a cool hackathon this weekend. There's still space. I've been informed to ask if people would like to hack at the hackathon. There's some cool prizes, and it's this weekend. So the next question is, who here has used a DApp, a decentralized application, before, ever? Okay. And of those, there's only 3 or 4-ish? Okay. Cool. Okay, yeah. Good. So, yeah, so I'm working again at BigChainDB and doing data science. So BigChainDB, obviously working in blockchain, and I'm doing data science, so it's really two deep tech topics. And it's really interesting to see the convergence of these two, or the intersection of these two, what we can think about and what we can imagine the future to be. And that's maybe, so I know we have some amazing speakers on the panel, and I just want to warm us up with thinking about where these amazing technologies are going currently, but also maybe even 10 years in the future, what could, like, how could these technologies change the world? So a bit of motivation, why Ocean Protocol? So a big part of Ocean Protocol is centered around the concept of the data economy. And the data economy we know is very large, so data drives a lot of businesses, very important. It's always been important, and it's even more important today than ever, and it's still growing. So we know that there is there's no real concrete numbers on this. Like, how do you measure this thing called the data economy? Well, there's no real marketplace that you can just go to and sort of track, like you do GDP for a country. So we know it's big, we know it's growing. So there's one number from a European study in 2016. It was estimated at 330 billion, rising to over double that by next year. And there's other similar numbers, so trillions of euros, let's say. And yeah, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of aspects of this. It's the other, where do you draw the boundaries of the data economy? Data generation, collection, storage, AI is a big driver. So why is AI driving this thing? Well, we know that artificial intelligence, particularly deep learning, for example, is very data hungry. So we have a study showing, and a lot of experience, that the more data you have, the better your models are. And the better your models are, the better value you can create or you can capture. And we have this rise of these tech giants, Facebook, Google, Netflix. These are all very much data-driven companies. And they have this incentive because data is so valuable, because it leads to better AI. They have an incentive to hoard it and silo it. So that means they don't want to share it. They want to collect it. It gives them a huge advantage. It allows them to make bigger profits and thereby collect more and more data. So it's this cyclical effect. So if you follow Ocean Protocol, you know that we're, in some sense, let's say, opposed to such a, can you plug it in? That's okay, I can do it with one hand. Yeah, so you know that if you've read our blog posts and things, you know that we're trying to build something that can lead to a different way forward, let's say. So if we just take the trajectory of Google and Facebook and these other big tech companies, where is it going? Where is it leading to? So that's one reason why, I think I have to turn it on. Yeah. Why data is important. It drives AI. And yeah, some other studies. So for example, why AI is improving so much again is a lot of new techniques which are data hungry. So image recognition is better than human for many tasks, and that's really amazing, actually. And there's a lot of other tasks that are becoming better than human. So that is real artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of other things coming. So we also have, for example, the game of Go was won by Google recently as well, and many other examples. So we also have some challenges when we try to think about how to kickstart this economy, this data economy. So one main issue is just connecting these different, the different problems, the solutions, and the tools and resources that can be used to solve those problems. So we have problem owners, we have the solvers, and we have all the resources like data, AI. So let's make it concrete. Let's think of, for example, climate change is a big problem. Maybe the United Nations would like to solve this. And there are amazing climate scientists in some other country, but they want access to data in another country. So maybe there's 3 different countries, 3 different players. So how do we connect these things? Because we know that there's a huge potential to solve this problem using artificial intelligence and AI and more data. So it's really about connecting. Another aspect is how can we unlock even more sensitive data? So climate data is open. There's no private, well, not all climate data, but most climate data is open and scientifically funded. And there's a lot of data that is very sensitive and very private, which can also impact our world. So let's say I have a friend who is a genetics researcher researching genetic diseases and multi-factor genetic diseases such as Alzheimer's. And they, of course, really struggle with getting exome data, so the full human DNA data. And they have centers around the world, but getting access to these centers is very problematic from, obviously, from a privacy perspective. So you don't want to just give your complete genome to anybody. So those are some of the key challenges. So just in a nutshell for what Ocean wants to do, firstly, we want to be a substrate for connecting these main pillars. So we want to allow problem solvers to go to one decentralized place, acting as a public utility, so not just going to, for example, a FANG company, so Facebook, Amazon, Google company portal, but maybe a public utility, so something that's owned by everyone and not just one huge corporation. And connect with the same substrate, we want to connect the problem solvers out there, the data scientists and the modelers, and also the resources that they can use to solve the problem. So we want to be the connecting substrate. And then the second one for the unlocking access to private data, we want to enable people to exploit private data without that data being released into the wild. So we want to protect that private data, keep it private, but allow data scientists to exploit that, to train models on that. So one potential way forward is actually to, let's take this as a privacy zone. We have the data there, and the data scientists will send in their algorithm on premise. The model is trained on premise with the data beside it, and then we can extract the value from that in some way, maybe by getting a productionized model or the model weights or federated learning. There's many different paths, and I'll talk about that in a bit. So AI orchestration is key to unlocking this data economy. So there's a lot of challenges in data fragmentation, tracking who owns what, how to get into production, and et cetera. So that's a huge task, AI orchestration. Not just data orchestration, but AI orchestration. And I like to use this word AI ecosystem for what the future could hold. So I use the word ecosystem because an ecosystem is, it's a complex system. It's very difficult to define. It evolves. It might have some anti-fragile behaviors. It might be robust against certain things, but it's an evolving thing, and that's the way that I like to think about it. And furthermore, Ocean Protocol, we are really open source, permissionless, and we're striving to be completely community owned. Okay, so to get into some demo, some concrete demo of what Ocean is. So it's not a technical talk, but I'll just very briefly describe our main components. So we have on the one hand, this is your user or your client. This could be in the browser. This could be your local machine. And using a library, you would like to interact with Ocean Protocol. So what is Ocean Protocol? On the one hand, it is a decentralized, Ethereum-powered smart contract platform running on proof of authority. And that is called, each node is called a keeper. So they keep the network alive, and they perform functionality to keep that network running optimally. We have a parity secret store to keep things private. And then we have two main microservices running. So this is the Web 2.0 world. So we have a component which is acting as a proxy to preserve your privacy but allow you access to things. So that's acting as a middle person in the stream. And then we also have a storage component which is storing the metadata for an asset. So this is what a static asset looks like, what a data set would look like. So we have a data set. It has several different, this thing has several different perspectives or identities or components to it, let's say. It does live on the blockchain, so it has an ID, and it has metadata attached to that, which describes this asset, this data set. And then thirdly, the data must live somewhere. So it can be stored on premise, it can be on IPFS, in a cloud as well. So we have drivers for all of those components. Yeah, so then I will give a quick demo. So this is what our dApp looks like, our front-facing component. This is a test net that we're running against. So yeah, here are the components. So this is the metadata store that's running, and the proxy, and our library. Yeah, so that's pretty technical, but we also have this thing called a burner wallet. So we know that there is a lot of friction in getting, so I always ask this question at the beginning of the talk, like how many people have used a dApp in the last year? And even at really crypto-centric talks, most people are only using their own dApps. And there is friction to getting onboarded into the decentralized world. So this was one thing that we built, which is a temporary wallet, which is a blockchain identity, so it's a public key, private key pair. So yeah, so this is a temporary wallet that allows you to start getting up and running with your dApp immediately. So you don't need MetaMask, which is the typical way that you would want to interact with a dApp. And yeah, let's just go ahead and publish an asset. No, look, first we're going to look at what is there. So we have this concept called channels, and then we have data sets on this marketplace. So yeah, we have different categories, and then you can, these are a lot of test assets because this is not our production network. So we have a lot of test things. So how does it look to publish an asset? So we're going to actually publish an asset now. So I have some MRI Alzheimer's data. Let's just say MRI1. I'm going to add it to IPFS. This is also a great new feature that we've released. Thank you, Matthias. And so now, that's amazing, right? I'm now using IPFS. It's a decentralized storage mechanism for my storage, and I'm not relying on Amazon or Google or Microsoft for the storage. So some description, test, give it a category, and creation date is fine. And I'm the author, let's say, and give it a license, public, and then register. And so now it's going to interact with the blockchain components and the microservice components and publish that in Ocean. So now, this is now searchable by anybody on the planet. And because it lives in the blockchain, it's not very easy to censor such a thing. So that's just a really super quick demo. And I'll go back to the presentation. Okay, so I'm a data scientist, so I've just registered a data set, but my life is a lot more than about just data. So this is a typical, very simplified pipeline of how I think about modeling and creating value from data. So you have data, you have some script, could be Python, Jupyter, Notebook, could be R, who knows. You execute that somewhere, and of course, this is a critical step for things like deep learning, where it's very computationally expensive. You produce some model that is trained, and then you send it back you send it to production, you analyze it, you iterate on this, of course, many, many times, and finally you get some value, for example, predicting broken bones in x-rays or something. So what we've just done now is we've registered the data. So that lives as a blockchain identity plus the metadata, and that metadata is stored in this database. But actually, there's a bunch of other things I can store. These are also static assets. I can store the Jupyter notebook or the R script. I can store that as well. I can store the train weight, so I can actually store a pre-trained model. So there's a number from, it takes a huge amount of energy to train some of these models. So it's very interesting for us to be able to share them and potentially monetize them. So the other interesting thing here is there are some other circles that I haven't actually registered, and I'll get to that in a second. And the other component I could register is just basically the whole thing. I could just point to these other assets, and that's a composite asset. That's the whole workflow now registered. And this is a real data science workflow, so that just gives you an impression like it's a lot more complicated, obviously, but yeah. That's what's currently possible. So now let's talk a little bit about this no data escape case. So as I mentioned, this is the second issue. How do we exploit things like genetics data, skin cancer images, your banking history, your insurance information to solve social economic problems in the world? So you don't want to just release this information into the wild. And currently I'm downloading this information on my machine, and then I could just turn around and give it to somebody else or sell it myself. So we want to prevent that. So the next level of abstraction would be then to think about this asset, which I've previously described as a static file, is now an endpoint. And we can think of a data set also as an endpoint. You're actually getting a service. That service is you get access to download that. You're streaming that information. So with that abstraction, we can put anything behind an endpoint, actually. And that is what I mean by generalized AI asset. So for example, you can train on my GPU at a certain price per hour. That could be an endpoint. You could do some model prediction on some forest satellite images and calculate how much deforested area is there based on my model that I have running. So I'm productionizing that model and giving you access to that. You could also stream data. You could also train a federated model across many different machines. And you could even tie that into in the agreement that you're signing, you could release payment only if a certain accuracy is achieved. And that's something that we're building. So the big picture is, again, sending the data, having the data private in a firewall, and modeling your script. So what you would do is you would take a starter code, you would prepare your script, and send that script to the data owner, so on-premise. they would train it on your behalf. And that gets really interesting for things like GDPR, right? So there's a definition of the data processor. So who's the data processor here? And do I need to sign a contract? So then, in this case, we would then have a private model, and you could then ping it for predictions. You could also, there's a lot of different modalities for this. So just straight on premise, you could think about also, you'll notice in this case, and I've gotten this question before, like I've sent my script to you, but what if my script is valuable? I want to keep that script myself. Well, you could then have a third party in the middle that both of you trust. So you could also have some secure execution environment, SGX, different types of technologies up and coming that could do that. So it's a double blind, essentially. Federated learning, production as an asset. So that's the example that I gave. And a lot of other topics like homomorphic encryption, differential privacy, et cetera. These are all topics that we are today building. And we have currently one client project wrapped up for this. And stay tuned, we have a lot of amazing tech coming in our next major release. So there are a lot of other topics to go into, but just due to time, I'll just give a quick overview. So things that we're actively researching. So obviously, when we talk about the data economy, we need a concept of how to price things. So because the data economy, it in some way doesn't really exist. We know that it exists, but it's not so, it's like sort of dark. We don't really see it, and we can't really get a tangible guess of how much it is, who are the main players. So pricing is a very interesting topic because we sort of have to bootstrap that and come with solutions that allow people to price their assets in the way that they want to. So a lot of interesting topics here to unpack, like bonding curves, and yeah, that's a whole talk on itself. But the idea of stake, putting skin in the game, you say that I stake a certain amount in this data set, and that allows you to signal to the market that this is valuable. Other people can challenge it, they can reduce your stake. Other people can stake with you, thereby increasing the overall signal. And the whole topic of ownership is of course, key to the data economy. So we know that in traditional property, it's been a physical thing that you transfer. And in the digital world, yeah, it's duplicated. So who owns that anymore? So that's obviously getting back to this concept of having some way to prevent escape of your asset. So you want to maintain the ownership of that by preventing other people from just copying it. So that is, I mean, this slide is really a lot of the reason why blockchain. So this is a huge question, of course, like why do you build this on a blockchain? But a lot of this stuff it falls naturally out of blockchain technology. So having a strong concept of identity in the form of a public-private key allows you to maintain ownership. And yeah, escape, we can think about things like doing compute to data, federated learning, encryption. How about transferring ownership, delegating rights? You can think about things like multi-sig wallets, having multiple addresses own something together. Again, this is, yeah, it's really amazing to see these topics develop and to build with them. So just some closing slides now. So sort of where we're aiming at, we have now built something which allows you to discover and gain access to data. So that is our production DApp, our marketplace. So I demonstrated just now the testnet, which has commons. So commons means that it's a open data and there's no price attached. But we have also a production network with the ability, so you can do that today. You can find a data set that you've built, and you could, today, with your laptop, you could go and register that and charge for it right now on Ocean Protocol Marketplace. So the next after that is to allow these composite assets and these bigger generalized assets. So not just static data, but endpoints that we can use to put these other amazing things behind. So for example, training on GPUs, productionizing models, and of course the big one, which is compute to data. And then longer term, or the bigger vision, let's say, is to build this permissionless ecosystem. So to hack on these incentivization mechanisms, make it fully permissionless and ownerless. Ownerless in the sense that no single entity owns it, but what's the opposite of ownerless? Owned? Owned by everybody at the same time. So to really make this as a public utility. A lot of developer resources, so developers were very happy to talk with you also and to get engaged with the project. So we have a lot of, it's all open source again. So I hope that was informative, and for me it's really interesting to hack at this intersection of AI and blockchain, and I'd be happy to take a few questions. Yes?
Could you just quickly explain how everything you talked about relates into the idea of the data economy, since this talk is infrastructure for data economies, so maybe just
yeah, sure. So if we consider again the data economy as, let's consider the fact that we want to streamline the transactions in the data economy. What does a transaction look like in the data economy? It means getting access to, purchasing access to, for example, or trading access for an asset and creating value. So when I think of economy, I think of people, of course, buying and selling things, but there's a reason behind that. They want to create value, and they want to, maybe somebody is specialized in a certain thing, and they can extract more value from that than you can. And that's really this transactional view, which is exactly what we're building. We're building a marketplace. So we're building a place that you can come and help to be part of this data economy by placing something for sale or giving access to. And of course, on the other flip side, the demand side, if you need something like an AI asset, data set, or trained model, then you come to the same place. Yeah.
Hello? Okay. So you talk about escape. I think that's valid. I mean, right? Someone is going to, steal it and sell it for themselves.
Yeah.
Right? But
they could, yeah.
They could, right? And I don't know if that's the biggest threat. I think possibly you hit on it when you said that having a third-party service come and kind of escrow the model, right? And then trusted in a trusted way process this data, right? But Google's already doing that, right? So Google owns large sets of models. They offer an API that will let you, view images, right? And somehow process those images, right? And they own that model. So why would you trust another party with your models?
So the example I gave was more about the no data escape case. Yeah. And in that case, I'm thinking again of this genetic data case. And in that case, if we have a hospital, then that could unlock that genetic data, for example. So what you're talking about is more the model escape, right? Yeah. So if that's the case,
like my question was why focus on data escape?
Yeah.
When I mean the problem with data escape is a random person is stealing it and reselling it, or in some cases privacy. But I think the bigger problem is model escape.
Sure, it could be. I don't know actually.
Right.
I think
homomorphic encryption is very far away.
Yeah. So I think currently I don't know of any place that you can go to train a model on private data, and that's why we're focusing on this first. And if we can solve this, I think the no model escape is the next step after that. It's definitely on our radar, though. Yeah. Hope that answers the question. We can talk after. Yeah.
Do you have an own business model? Because many of the business model that I see in the whole ocean thing is selling data, putting data in it. But what is your business model in the end?
So I am an employee of BigChainDB. we are a private GmbH. And you are correct that there is this dual identity that we have sometimes, because actually Ocean Protocol is a foundation. And Ocean Protocol is a project that we are building on behalf of the foundation. What BigChainDB has for a business model is to just be excellent in the blockchain space, to potentially offer services and build products on top of Ocean Protocol. So to use Ocean Protocols, because we do see that there's a huge potential. What does that exactly look like? We are looking for that right now. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I was wondering, you spoke earlier, and just in terms of protocol design, about the keeper nodes.
Yeah.
Are people who are running keeper nodes already like actively mining like Ocean tokens on the network, or like is that? I'm just wondering, has that incentive scheme kicked in, or like when?
No, not yet.
When would that effectively? When do you guys see those larger incentives like come into play?
Stay tuned. Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, we're a POA network. We're not a proof of work network. So the mining, we're not solving a crypto puzzle. So it's more about keeping the network. So we want to incentivize this network which supports the data economy. So we want to support activity which supports the data economy. What does that mean? That means doing activities such as validating data sets, curating data sets, indexing data sets, and other assets, of course, as well. And these are part of our roadmap, simply. We don't have, I can't tell you an exact date right now.
Okay. Maybe as a follow-up question, in that sense, do you see yourselves to some extent in the future competing with other kind of like storage networks, like Filecoin or like?
No, we use storage protocols and projects. We don't compete with them. So they are, for us, a storage, and we provide the orchestration layer. So that means we allow you to store the metadata and have that blockchain identity tied to it. And the storage itself is a service that can live on premise, S3, IPFS, Filecoin. Yeah, that's how we look at it. Yeah. Okay, I think we're running out of time. Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.